Welcome everybody to the most dangerous session of this conference. The session before the cocktails, that is. So thanks for coming. My name is Rich Lombardi. I work with the Advanced Power Alliance, which is a trade association that works in the Great Plains with private sector renewable energy developers, companies, manufacturers that do wind, solar, and battery storage. And this panel actually was a result of these questionnaires that you were asked to respond to. Last year we did an impromptu gathering and of lobbyists, and unfortunately you decided you wanted them back. So now you've got them. And let me just, almost coinciding with this conference over the last 18 years, there's been a robust discussion both at the state level and within public power boards that I think some of this conference has helped shaped. Certainly we are, I think, about 78 shopping days away from the start of the next legislative session. So I want you to feel really comfortable in asking these folks questions. These folks that we have on the panel are registered lobbyists for a number of different private companies that have been working a long time with changing the statutes as they relate to energy in the state. First gentleman up here is Eric Gerrard, and he's the lobbyist for the Advanced Power Alliance. So he represents a number of private companies. After him is David Levy, who is represents a lot of companies, both with his lobbying hat on as well as with the firm Baird, Holm, which does a lot of legal work. The last two guys in the panel actually are former legislators. Tim Gay was also a board member for a public power district, a county board member, and runs Catalyst and represents some of the top companies in the world, actually, that are doing clean energy work. And then finally, Senator Schilz, for us that have been lobbyists, you're always a senator. So Senator Klaus was saying that, but I think that's, and Senator Schilz was very instrumental in passing some landmark legislation that created an environment for further build-outs. So, and as the senators said, there's a number of bills that are pending from last year. So I think some of these guys will cover that. But I think we'll start with Eric and kind of give an overview of what we're looking at this next session.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us on the panel. My name is Eric Gerrard. As Rich said, I'm with American Communications Group. Rich Lombardi is actually founder of that, and Jennifer Williams is also here with our firm. So we represent a number of different clients, about 25 to 30 different clients, Advanced Power Alliance. We also represent City of Lincoln, who has a close tie to LES, Center for Rural Affairs, and a few others who are interested in this space. So it's kind of awkward or odd going after the senators, because as lobbyists we're used to typically agreeing with the senators and kind of sucking up to the senators. So hopefully we don't completely step on it after the senators talk. So they actually did a really nice job laying out, I think, some of the bills that carry over. I would say that make me and our clients nervous from an industry perspective. I'll go into just a little bit more detail on LB 468, which was talked about quite a bit. The nameplate, well, I guess it's the replacement for the inheritance tax, but well within that was the nameplate capacity tax, essentially doubling of that. And then I guess if any of the rest of the crew wants to talk about their thoughts on additional bills that carry over or potential other bills that are coming up. So LB 468, I think it was mentioned, it advanced from one round last session, and it now sits on select file. It was defeated on select file. It was a really close vote. And so this would have doubled the nameplate capacity tax. We heard from a number of developers that, this wasn't kind of this dramatic sort of statement they were making that they wouldn't be able to develop in our state. That was a real that was a reality if that bill would have passed. And so that still makes me nervous. It's on select file. It was good to hear some of the senators' perspectives that they think Senator Clements may take a different approach to how he's trying to replace the inheritance tax. But I always say we're paid to be nervous until we see something that we're trying to defeat, ultimately either IPP'd or fully defeated. So that's one we have high on our list. The other one is the Senator Quick bill, and I know he mentioned it in the previous panel. That's LB 484. And the way that the statute currently reads is if you have a wind or solar project, it is viewed as it's assessed as a commercial property, even if it's on an ag facility. And so you don't get assessed at the 75% ag value. Instead, you're assessed at the 100% value. And I know that's for some county assessors, that's provided some questions. And obviously for the industry, that has been problematic. So we appreciate Senator Quick taking that on. So those are two that carry over that we're working on. I'll let any of the other crew up here talk about what else to expect for this year.
Sure. Thanks, Eric. Thank you all for being here. I'm well aware that we are standing between you and cocktails. Very dangerous place to be. One could get trampled. But appreciate the opportunity. I want to pick up a little bit on a couple of things Eric said. One, the nameplate capacity tax. There was an interim study, I think it was mentioned, the senators mentioned in the Natural Resources Committee. We had a hearing about a month ago. And I'll share, I testified, and it was kind of funny. I was around in 2010 when we developed that, and now I'm back 15 years later to tell the story of long ago. It made me feel very old. But, you know, what I said to the committee was that when the legislature came up with the nameplate capacity tax in 2010, they hired an economist from the Bureau of Business Research at the University of Nebraska. And the economist came up with the number ultimately. The idea was that you would exactly replace the property tax that was paid under the then system, where wind turbines really was what we were talking about at the time, were valued as personal property. So the economists figured out the life of a wind turbine, the total amount, and kind of backed into the annual per megawatt number. And you hear from senators saying, well, there's been inflation, you know, since 2010, of course, we all know that. And so the nameplate capacity tax ought to go up as well. But the reality is that the cost of a wind turbine, for example, has dropped pretty dramatically in that time because of maturation of the industry and things like that. So in fact, if you go back and do that study again, I think what you'd end up with is a number that's about 2/3 of the current number. In 2016, Senator Al Davis carried a bill that added solar to the nameplate capacity tax. And quite candidly, they didn't do another study at that time. We just took the same number for wind and said, okay, that's going to work for solar. And so what I suggested to the committee, and this may or may not be in our client's best interest, but I think it's very fair and the right way to go about it, is hire the same group from the university and have them do the study again. And have them do the study for wind and have them do the study for solar. And quite frankly, I think battery storage also ought to be in the nameplate capacity tax. It's kind of funny with storage, we're sort of legislatively following a lot of the same path we followed 15 plus years ago with wind and with solar. And so go back and do that study. And I had some numbers from my testimony. I think based on my research, if you redid that study today, the tax for wind would be about $2,300 a megawatt per year instead of $3,518. Now, I'm not saying it should get lowered. I think there's some challenges there too. It's probably not a real popular position in a committee hearing. But if you redid the study, we'd have the actual numbers. I think for solar, you'd have a number that's probably around what you have today. And for batteries, I'm not sure what that number would be, but what my battery storage clients tell me is that putting storage in the nameplate capacity tax they would pay more tax on an annual basis, but because it's paid out over the life of the project instead of very front-loaded like personal property taxes, given the time value of money, it would work out okay. And they feel like it's a fair system and they're happy to be a part of it, at least the ones I represent and talk to about it. So that's what I hope happens with the nameplate capacity tax. I think, willy-nilly doubling any tax just because you can It's just not a good way to make public policy. It's bad for the industry I represent as well, but I just don't think it's a great way to make public policy. And I think what the legislature did in 2010 was a good process. It created a good system that's been a good incentive for development, but also been good for counties who have a very reliable, steady source of income that they can count on. It's easy for county assessors. There's a lot of good things about the system. Let's go do the study again and see what that number is. Just one other quick thing, and I'll pass the mic here. Senator Quick, thank you for bringing LB 484. A couple months ago, it was property tax protest season in the month of June, and we had some real interesting issues with assessors, and it wasn't combative, but they didn't really quite know how to deal with it. We had some situations where you've got solar on half the parcel, but not the other half of the parcel. So then what do you do? It's just a lot of real challenges with the way the law got changed. There's also currently a conflict internally in the statutes. And so I thank you for bringing LB 484. I think that, it's a policy change or a policy putback, but it's a really a valuable cleanup bill as well. We shouldn't have statutes that conflict with one another, and that would take care of that as well. So I'll stop there for now, and Tim, take it away.
Yeah, I guess I'd just say not to dwell on the nameplate and other things. We're, of course, supporting what they just said, but what I want to talk about a little bit is the makeup of the legislature now is much different than just a year ago. So you heard Senator Klaus up here with 46 years experience. He's on the Natural Resources Committee. It seems like we have a much better legislature that's open to the discussions than we did just a year ago. Several senators have left that were very anti-renewable on anything, no matter what it was. We're going to stop it. So I think the environment we're all working in, we're a little bit more positive than we have been going forward. It's a constant battle of educating people. But like I say, we've got a really good makeup of Natural Resources Committee. I think the Revenue Committee, Senator Dungan was talking about that, has some good members on there that understand renewables. So I'm excited about that, just looking at it. Senator Klaus probably hit the nail on the head too. What's it going to be about? Property taxes. And commend him for when we were battling the nameplate, doubling of the nameplate. It's like those counties that didn't want renewables and had an opportunity to get some money, large sums, didn't, then why should they benefit on some of these things? One thing on that nameplate, what I think we need to do as well is counties only get like 17% of the nameplate tax. So when you're on a county board and you're making a decision and you have a room full of angry constituents yelling at you, I'm getting $100,000 a year. That's all we're going to get. The school's going to get 600. The others are going to get another 200. We're like the lowest getting the money. So I think we need to make sure on that nameplate we're fair to the counties. We up it, then the whole county benefits, instead of just a small school district where your turbines are, where the solar is. So we need to make sure we're working together on that nameplate, that it's a win for both people with some guidelines in there. You can't just throw a carrot. I think there should be a carrot with a stick. Everyone talked about permitting is so hard. Well, there's certain things we could do that are reasonable permitting for both sides, and then the counties still get a lot of flexibility on what they want to do in their individual county. So I think that's one of the things we need to work on. We've all talked about it before and worked together on 99% of all these issues. But those to me are important things going forward, whether we get it done this year or next year. Sometimes it takes a little while. You throw the idea out, you get feedback from everybody, and then we go next time. 12 senators are leaving, I think, term limited. So we're going to have a lot of work to do to educate people working with public power, and these are complex issues. So working with public power and conservation groups and everybody that's involved, we need to make sure we get together and keep educating, because you have 800 issues going on in the legislature, and this is just one. Energy is important, I know, to everyone here, but it's just one issue. You got healthcare, you got the budget, you got everything else, and Ken knows. But that's what I think I'd like to work on with everybody, is kind of making it a fair deal for everyone involved.
Great, thanks, Tim, and good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be later in the afternoon. So my name's Ken Schilz. I work with Nebraska Strategies here in Lincoln. Before that, I served 8 years in the legislature, chaired the Natural Resources Committee, and served on that committee my whole 8 years. Everything these folks have said is exactly right. That not to pound on the nameplate capacity, but in talking to folks and dealing with folks that we deal with, a lot of times, just like Tim was talking, there's kind of a disconnect as to what the nameplate capacity tax is and who exactly it benefits, just like you said. And so I think it's always good as you get a little ways out from having these things implemented to go back and take a look to make sure that it's doing exactly what you wanted. And because of what you said too, that we don't have the large anti-faction in the legislature right now. And now we can start to think about bringing these sorts of issues back and taking a good look at it to where we have reasonable conversations that can go on instead of everybody just shooting to kill whatever comes out that would help renewables. So I think also that we never know what the biggest issues are, doesn't seem like, until you get into session. So everybody stay tuned because you never know what could happen. But I think Tim and the rest were right. I think that there is an opportunity here to continue to strengthen the foundation of the opportunities for renewables in Nebraska, and I think that's a path that we all should be looking at taking.
Great. One of the other, when we've tracked public policy here, we started with wind, and then solar came on, and now we're in the battery area, and the Southwest Power Pool is going through a lot of juggling to figure out how to calculate and how do you integrate battery systems. But we have to do the same thing with statutes to reflect that. And there has been a lot of discussion on the floor over the last couple of years on this issue. Anybody in the panel want to talk about, there's some pending legislation on the inclusion of battery in statutes?
Sure, I'll take a shot at that, and anybody else, please chime in. You know, it is interesting, again, reflecting back, and I think I was remiss to say, I think Senator Schilz and Senator Gay, you were both in the legislature when the nameplate capacity tax came around. I don't mean to impugn you with being old like I impugn myself, but I appreciate that you guys were there, and I think that was really an extraordinary process of getting people together and doing legislation the right way. It is interesting, though, also looking back, I feel like with storage now we're following the same kind of path that we followed with wind and solar. Before LB 1048 in 2010, it was wind then, but it had to go to the Power Review Board, and it went to the Power Review Board under the same standard of review, if you will, legally, as a coal plant or a gas plant, and that really didn't apply very well to wind at that time, and so we figured out a regulatory path that was much more restrictive than the current regulatory path for wind and solar. It was a bigger challenge. There was more uncertainty for developers, but nonetheless, it was a path, and it was a door opening to the industry, and it worked. And then we, I think, came up with a better system in 2016 with LB 824, and I sort of feel like that's happening now with storage, where it's new, people are interested. It's, I think, a great technology, and it really changes the nature and the capabilities of renewable generation, and standalone storage, I think, can be incredibly beneficial to utilities. I don't think you'll see a big utility substation in 15 years that doesn't have some kind of a storage installation. And so last year, Senator Prokop, I heard he was around. I don't know if he's in the room or was able to stay, but he introduced what was LB 349. And the goal really of LB 349 was to codify the regulatory process and statute that the Power Review Board had come up with sort of out of necessity. Again, right, we had this new technology, people were coming forward and trying to figure out how to deal with it and protect the industry, protect the utilities, and recognize people's investment opportunities and their property rights and all of those things. And some of the same issues like eminent domain protection that were big issues back in 2007, 2008 with wind and solar, those are now issues with battery storage. And so LB 349 is trying to to address those. And then I talked about the nameplate capacity tax as well. So yeah, LB 349 really is the primary battery storage bill. There's some battery storage safety regulations that all the developers follow, because if you don't follow those, you won't probably be able to insure or get investment for a project, but they may or may not be currently in law. And so having a bill that, brings those safety standards into law, that's a good thing, right? It kind of levels the playing field and gives certainty to people on the Power Review Board and local zoning officials, things like that as well. So, stay tuned, more to come. There's definitely some debate, more debate, I guess, an amount of debate about the wisdom of private investment in storage that surprises me a little bit. I think Nebraska should be open for business, and if people want to invest and pay property taxes, we should figure out a way to let them do that. We also, have a long system of great utilities and low electric rates, and so we need to figure out how to get those two things working together. But just to say, no, we don't want your private investment, your money's bad, I don't think we want to do that as a state either. And so we'll figure that out, kind of like we did with wind and solar. It's kind of interesting to me how things come full circle, and I think that's a little bit where we are with storage, and I do think we'll make progress like we always have. We'll all get together and work together, and maybe, I like to say in legislation, if you get 75% of what you want, you had a hell of a day. And so if we can do that with storage in 2026, that'd be awesome.
Great. I think we're ready to take any questions. I think we have some microphone folks, so if there's anybody that has any questions you want to shoot to these guys, let's do it. Okay. Mary.
Thank you. So we heard reference to the kind of pressure that county commissioners hear from their constituents when it comes to renewable energy and battery storage. How do you perceive the pressure, one way or the other, that legislators at the state level feel from their constituents on this subject?
There was a hearing last year, Bill LB 503, that was in front of the Revenue Committee, I think. And I think, Mary, that was a good example of, you saw a lot more proponents come out in that hearing, which I think is similar to what we've heard happens at the county level. That's not always the case. Sometimes it's a little more nuanced, the bills that the legislature sees. But again, I think a part of that is our job is to work with landowners who benefit from this and work with other advocates to make sure the senators are hearing a positive point of view and not just the negative point of view. But there have been a few bill hearings I can think of in the last few years where certainly the opposition was a lot more in number and probably a lot louder than those who were supportive of the legislation. And I think, the senators can speak to this better, but I think it's our job as advocates for the industry to give them support and let them know that that there is a lot of support in Nebraska. So I don't know if I fully answered the question. I think it's somewhat similar at a county level. It does get a little more difficult, and this is, I don't know if it's good, bad, or indifferent, to follow the different stages of legislative debate. And so I think even for opponents who are tracking a bill, it's up to the speaker. And sometimes we don't know until 11:30 p.m. at night that bill is going to be on the agenda the next day. And so, again, I don't know if that's good or bad. For us, it just means a lot of late nights trying to track exactly what the agenda is going to be the next day. So the public hearing, I think you see a lot of opposition. It becomes more difficult to track the legislative process, I believe.
Yeah, and Mary, thanks for the question. I think one of the things that's extremely important is, there's a lot of loud voices out there saying certain things. But the key to what we all try to do up here is we want to make sure that, and let's take the doubling of the nameplate capacity tax to help inheritance tax. When everybody thought of that at first, it all happens kind of in an echo chamber, and everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, what a great idea! This is going to work wonderfully, right?" And then they bring it, they introduce it, and we all go, "Well, senators, let's sit down and let's talk about what this really does." And I think that what you saw was that understanding of reality versus, fiction, basically. And I think it works the same way on whatever level of government you are. You'll always have the noise that's out there, for lack of a better term, the desperate attempt to turn things in your favor, whether you have the facts or not, And so I think it's extremely important to make sure that as lobbyists and folks that are here to support the senators and to support good, positive legislation getting done, it behooves us to make sure that we deliver the facts along with the challenges that those facts bring, if you know what I mean. And so being that honest broker with the senators and building that sort of relationship only helps in the future as you move to this, because then all of a sudden when somebody comes up and says, my cattle won't breed back because, they got a horn growing out of the middle of their head and their hooves are all foundered and all that, the senators call us and say, okay, what's the truth here? Where does this come from? And so it gives us that opportunity. So it's all about having those relationships and the trust of knowing where it's at, and then being able to deliver the facts as they need to be delivered to persuade folks the way you want them to go.
Mary, we were talking earlier. I said, you learn something. You're still learning. 24 years on the board of directors at NPPD, you're still learning because the business is changing so much. When I'm talking to senators, I think all of us, it's so politicized now, of course. What isn't in this country? But back in the day, again, old, well, it was a business thing. It's a technical, how's energy, business, whatever. These CEOs now got to be politicians almost, but it's so political. So when you're talking to Republicans, there's a certain amount of energy, certain kinds they like, and Democrats like certain things too. Are we having an economic discussion? Are we having a conservation discussion? What are we doing? It's tailored to each senator, every senator. And then there's some that just don't bother. But we have a lot less don't bother. I think more like I want to hear, I want to learn, whatever. But it's a partisan issue. There's red and blue now, but there's not a lot of purple anymore. So I think when you go into it, you got to know your senator, you got to know your issue, and try to stick to the facts and keep them on track. But it's funny, sometimes our clients are like, well, I don't understand what they don't get here. It's like, well, I don't know. Let me explain to you. But, it's a very complex business. So each individual is different. That's my point. I don't know what you think.
I think, Tim, you're right. The national politics have definitely changed what happens at the Nebraska legislature. I think not just on renewable energy. But, I don't know that this is true, but it feels like it's true. There's nothing like a renewable energy bill to turn a legislative committee hearing into a county board hearing in terms of how it feels. I'm sure there are other issues, but that's how it feels. But Tim's point also reminded me, again, I guess it's the day to reminisce, but I think this is a poignant story. Senator Chris Langemeyer really became the champion and the leader for renewable energy in that 2010 kind of time frame, especially at the beginning. And we came in early in, I think it was 2009, and we said, wind turbines, clean and green. And he about physically removed me from his office. I think if he could have, he might have. We came back literally a week later and we said, also tax revenue. And he said, tell me more. Right? This was not a guy, I could be wrong, and he's not here to defend himself, but I think I'm right. This was not a guy who was predisposed to champion wind energy at the time. But it became a business conversation, and it became something that could help him, and he thought his colleagues in the legislature achieve something, solve a problem that they saw out there for their constituents and for Nebraskans. And he became then interested and open to learning and to hearing, and ultimately got others on the committee involved, and Speaker Flood at the time. And you'd like to see it work that way more often, and it's a little bit tougher now because, as Tim said, you kind of start out in opposite camps, and it's hard to get people out of their camp sometimes.
We have a mic.
How do you all see the impact of the state suing OPPD on its resource choices? And how's that going to be impacting the legislature? Sorry, just thought it should be asked.
He's retired.
I think it'll be interesting. I think that, I mean, obviously, as far as I know, this is something that is unprecedented that we've never seen before. What will happen is this is one of those things that I said, you never know exactly what's going to hit until it smacks you right in the face. So I think that everybody is waiting to find out exactly what you're talking about, because I don't think anybody really knows. I mean, I think that's probably the case. I think that everybody is wondering exactly how this is going to play out. You especially. So I mean, I don't really have much else to say, but I do think depending on which way it goes, it could really affect what happens in the legislature, what the conversation is in the legislature, and how that turns out into the future as far as what shall I say, champions for public power, and what that means as it moves forward. So stay tuned. You'll know before we will, probably.
I'll comment a little. I was on the OPBD board for, I see it as a continual erosion of local authority. I mean, you're seeing this a lot of times. Cities will come in, counties will come in, they will preach to the senators, and no offense, not all senators, but we'll tell them, and it's like, well, whatever. Here's what you should be doing. So I think it's a continuation of that. I don't know all the specifics behind it. I know they're going to have a vote on the North Omaha generation facilities, and I don't know all that behind it. But yeah, I was pretty amazed because public power is always on this pedestal, in Nebraska. It's one of our cherished institutions. So, but I don't know all the facts. I respect Attorney General Hilger's, to the ninth degree. But so I don't know. That's a great question, though. We will see what happens, and I don't know. Let's probably ask Javier that tomorrow. But
As I think, Scott, you wisely said earlier today, my lawyer tells me not to talk about litigation, but I don't listen to my lawyer, so no. I agree with what these guys said, and I have read the complaint, and there's a lot in there. And if it ends up going to trial and there ends up being a decision from the court, not only the outcome of that decision, but what the court writes in that opinion could have far-reaching impacts for the electric industry in Nebraska, period, full stop, for renewable energy in Nebraska. There's a lot in the complaint that really to me is not kind of fundamental to the central issue that I think the Attorney General is trying to achieve. And if the court picks that up and writes a kind of broad opinion, that could have a lot more of an impact than just that. That lawsuit's a big deal, and what Tim said is right. I mean, there's some real fundamental things there, but it could be a lot bigger deal if it goes to trial and if there's a court decision. If that court decision says a lot more than it needs to, courts try not to do that usually. But not only will the pure yes or no outcome be very interesting, but then what the court says in support of that will be very interesting and potentially very influential on what we all do.
Can I add one more thing to that? Just one more thought on that. Again, with the complexity of the industry and the boards and all the committees we're on, and it takes a lot of time. It's a lot of expertise on those boards trying to do what's best for Nebraska, in my mind. I mean, we have differences of agreement on what that may be, and all boards do, right? But they're still looking at reliability, affordability, So that's the thing, is disappointing a little bit. I assume there was some kind of talk there. It just didn't come out of the blue, but I don't know all the facts. But the one thing I would say is, like, on the LES is going to be different than OPBD. I mean, it's going to be different than NPBD. They're all different. So I just know my time on the board that was spent on there, everyone was trying to do the very best they could for the ratepayers. And the word ratepayer came up millions of times. So it's not like they're working in a vacuum and, we're not listening to you people. So that's what kind of shocked me when I read it. I assume there was I hope there were some conversations, and we shall see. These lawyers will work it out, I suppose.
Great. Good question. Anybody else? Going. Oh, John.
But I need a mic, of course.
You can take this one.
So there seems to be a growing acceptance on the part of the public officials that I engage with that ag is really in some very substantial trouble. We're upside down in soybeans. We're upside down on corn. We have folks who are fixing to make us maybe a little less right side up in beef. And so as you look at the ag economy and you kind of look at the things, the levers that can be pulled or the buttons that can be pushed to help. So as you look at rural economic development in Nebraska, two of the success stories in recent times of things that we've been able to do at the state level, wind and solar, as rural economic development goes, as new sources of income goes, as new tax base goes, as new good paying jobs go, that's one of the more successful approaches that we've had to try to help rural communities prosper and move forward. So we've always had the most success in my years of working in this renewable energy space of being able to make renewable energy economically green. So do you think with the sagging ag economy, do you think that there might be a bit of a boost or a bit of upside potential in trying to look at renewable energy in that light?
Thanks, John. I think when you have situations like we're in right now, where we're starting to see the farm economy start to take a turn, I think that always presents opportunities. I also think that with more people paying attention to the long-term needs of power, not just here in Nebraska, but overall the United States, with the new AI economy coming around and all of that, I think they're starting to understand that, it's not about, at least the folks that I deal with, it's not necessarily so much about what kind of energy is or where it's being produced, but get it online as quick as possible. And so I think that what you'll see is kind of twofold that way. You'll see people now that have been adamantly against renewable generation hold their nose because they don't want to see that economic development project that's coming into their backyard not be able to find the energy. So they will. It changes things when all of a sudden you're up against the wall and you don't have what you need right now. So I think you're right. Whether it's the farm economy that pushes that, which it always will. I mean, we have to be cognizant of that anytime that you're dealing with commodities such as corn and cattle and soybeans, you're going to trend towards a break even. So you always have to be able to find something else to help maintain that profitability and lifestyle. So I think you're exactly right on. So I think that as this happens, there will be opportunities for developers out there. There will be more opportunities for landowners too. So we need to be ready to accept that when it comes, because if you miss this opportunity to latch on to a project like this, if it's available in your area, you'll never get a chance at it again.
Well, the other thing too, Luke Virgil was talking earlier about economic development this morning, about if you're a landowner, you take it much differently than how you're going to protect your property. But he talked about diversification of your farm. No one tells you what to plant, what to do with your farm, but yet neighbors then trample on your property rights when you want to put renewable energy. So those are one of those things. Whose rights are we going to look out for in the future? But I agree. Some people, a lot of people want it. Unfortunately, it's hard for them to speak up. You got that, and I think John said it. The opposition is much louder always than the proponents. So, you get yelled out of the room almost, and some people just don't want to do it. But I think it's going to be much more different topics going forward if this economy stays bad. And I hope it doesn't, but in a way, this is a great opportunity to help people out there diversify their income.